It was nearing 11 p.m. Saturday evening, and just like clockwork, little Wayne was immediately awake from a sound sleep, the same as he had done for most of his tender years. He just turned 10, and the Saturday ritual had been happening for as long as he could remember. Right on time, Gramps crept into his room, and he got out of bed and hugged him. The entire house was asleep, his mom, dad, and even Wolf, the family dog. The roomy Victorian house was built over a century ago, and had housed the Wilcox family from the day it was built. Gramps was even born there. Granny was still in her own room, having been in a coma for several years, but the family all cared for her, talked and read to her, with nurses coming in during most days. Granny had not changed for several years, and had been married to Gramps for over 50 years when she became sick. Although his real name was Warren, everybody called him Little Wayne after his Gramps' name. He had asked so many questions about his Gramps, and was his constant companion for years. They had become inseparable buddies from the time little Wayne was born. Together they crept quietly out of the bedroom and into the kitchen, where a piece of leftover apple pie was waiting for little Wayne. Gramps never ate anything, claiming it would hurt his girlish figure. After the pie came the weekly sneaking out of the house. Wolf raised his head, turning it to one side in curiosity, and then lay back down, fully aware, as it were, of the weekend ritual and not to be bothered. Gently closing the door behind them, they strolled out on the Hampton Avenue, the avenue where they lived on, holding Gramps' hand. The moon behind him cast their shadow on the sidewalk in front of them. Gramps and little Wayne had a special bond. Summer was ending, and the fog was settling over the lawns with their piles of fallen leaves where raking had begun. Wolf and little Wayne loved to run and jump into the pile his dad was raking, and he good-naturedly put up with it. After their short stroll, they entered the house from the rear. The door opened into the kitchen, where steep stairs led up to the attic. It was a lofty storage area with an accumulation of extra furniture, and hanging on one side were winter clothes, soon to be brought down and substituted for the short pants and t-shirts currently in the closets. As they climbed the stairs, they were careful to step over the tread. A solid oak door stood sentry at the top of the stairs. It was close to midnight. As they approached the door, little Wayne always started to knock, as if expecting someone to answer. But Gramps would always chuckle and say it wasn't necessary to knock, there just wasn't anyone there to welcome us in. We could always just enter. And he would turn the bronze-burnished oval doorknob and open the heavy door. The familiar aroma of attic dust assailed their noses as they entered the room. A solitary light bulb on a chain just inside the door was the only illumination for the room. A couch set across the corner on the far side with an old Victrola player standing guard near it. A winding cramp on the player's side powered the turntable as it played thick black records with solid-colored labels. A large silver needle holder was placed on the record, and the sound would come through the front of the player. On days when little Wayne would venture up, he would go through the stack of records, picking out an unfamiliar title like Tiptoe Through the Tulips and I've Got a Rocket in My Pocket, playing them for hours. Gramps usually sat on the couch, and little Wayne sat on the floor next to his feet. After a few minutes, he would start telling him about what had happened during the week. There were the usual bullies, new kids moving into the neighborhood, a girl he liked, trouble with history class, and long division. Gramps listened with interest as always, but never offered any help, and in time little Wayne found he could come up with answers to his troubles on his own by just talking about them. After they sat for a while, little Wayne started getting tired, and a kind of sadness came over Gramps' face. He had been alone for a few years with Granny sick, and it was obvious that he missed her something terribly. Little Wayne patted his hand as usual, and as they stood to go, Gramps put his hand on little Wayne's shoulder and guided him toward the door. They crept back down the stairs, coming into the bedroom where little Wayne got into bed and fell asleep almost immediately. He dreamed about Gramps, how much these weekends meant to him, and how much he loved him. He cherished their time together and wished Gramps could be happy again. The next weekend the ritual began as usual, except that as they were strolling down Hampton Avenue, Little Wayne noticed Gramps had an unusual little bounce to his step. Looking at him carefully, his face didn't seem to have the that Little Wayne so often saw there. It was nearing midnight as they climbed the stairs to the attic, and when Little Wayne started to knock, Gramps didn't stop him this time. Little Wayne looked back at Gramps with some curiosity. Gramps just said, "Perhaps this time you should knock. You just never know." And so Little Wayne timidly knocked on the door. The doorknob started to turn, and as the door opened, the person on the other side of the door became clearer through the darkened room. Little Wayne suddenly realized that the person opening the door was Granny. She had a smile on her face, and Gramps immediately moved toward her, and they hugged. And then she hugged Little Wayne. It had been so long since he had seen her up and been hugged by her. All the old feelings came back about how much he had missed her, and he could just imagine how Gramps had felt and why he didn't seem so sad tonight. They all went into the room together, and Gramps and Granny sat on the couch, holding hands and looking at each other. Little Wayne didn't know what to say, and just sat at their feet looking up at them in wonder. Soon it was time to go back to bed, and they both led Little Wayne back to his room, where he got back into bed, quickly falling asleep and being glad Gramps and Granny were back together again. The next morning, as Little Wayne came down for breakfast, he noticed the sad looks on everyone's faces. Something had changed, and as he looked at his parents, his mom said, "Honey, your Granny passed away last night." Little Wayne was stunned. He didn't know how to react. He was sad, but he had just seen her last night. As tears welled in his eyes, he was able to haltingly say, "And now she's with Gramps." Mom and Dad just looked at each other and finally said, "That's right, and now she's with Gramps." And as they both came over, they hugged him. Tuesday was Granny's funeral. Little Wayne would not go because he had a secret. Mom and Dad didn't understand, but did not force him to go. After they left for the church, he went up to the attic. He climbed the stairs and knocked on the door. No one answered, so he turned the bronze knob and went in. Nothing had changed in the room. He walked around looking at everything, not sure what he was looking for. Finally, as he was going over to the couch to sit, passed by the Victrola. He noticed one of the old thick records on the turntable. It was one that had lost its label, and he had not seen it before. He turned the crank, winding up the motor, and placed the heavy needle head at the beginning of the record. Then he released the handle that started the record turning. He had not heard this particular record before, but as it played, it was as if he knew every word by heart. In the years that followed, Little Wayne inherited the house, became a father, then a grandfather with a grandson. He called his grandson Little Warren, who became like a shadow to his Gramps. He is looking forward to what will transpire next. And this is the record that was on Victrola.
Me and my shadow strolling down the avenue. Me and my shadow, not a soul to tell our troubles smooth. And when it's 12 o'clock, we climb the stairs. We never know, or nobody there. Just me and my shadow, all alone and oh so blue.